Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, Saturday live stream. Hopefully this time no weird sounds pop up. And we've got maybe interesting one. I think it'll be an interesting one. We really only have two topics that we're going to focus on today. We're going to go over a brand I don't normally discuss on this channel, Apple, because they make the Apple Watch, or they did. And we're going to explore that a little bit because they've gotten into some legal hot water regarding their smartwatches. And so I think that's going to be definitely relevant for us, given that we're a watch channel. And then Rolex, also in legal hot water, also regarding watches, but for a very different reason and in a very different country. So we will explore both of those, and that will be today's live stream. So I do not have any pre-recorded videos that dropped between the last live stream and the current live stream. I do have one that I haven't decided yet if I will release it today or possibly tomorrow, but my 5 most worn watches of the year. I figured let's cap that'll probably be my last pre-recorded video of 2023. I did record it this morning. I haven't started editing it yet. So other than the thumbnail, so I have not. It's not a very long video, so it shouldn't take too long to edit. I just haven't decided if I'm doing it today or if I'm not. I've been working on some pinball stuff, which is my other hobby. So that's sort of consuming time. Well, all right. Working on means mostly playing, because apparently we are doing 12 days of kaiju. And since I own a Godzilla pinball, I need to play it every day and achieve certain things to get all the little badges, like achievements in Steam or Xbox. You got to get the little achievements. So I've been working on that. Plus, one of my podcast co-hosts actually for Christmas got me a pinball machine, and it's needed a little bit of maintenance, even though it's a new in box game. So I've been working on bending the ramps and stuff to make it. Sometimes things don't feed cleanly. There's always issues with pinball, so you can't just send it to the pinball maker. They're too big. You have to fix them yourself. So I've been too busy to do proper watch videos, but I did shoot one this morning. We just need to get it edited up. So we will jump into the Apple news first once I catch up with folks. So Ken, welcome to the live stream. Haven't seen you on a few recently. And thank you, of course, for being a 99 Cent Club member. As a reminder, folks, you can join the 99 Cent Club by following the link in the video description. But even if you don't want to do that, because I understand, because it is 99 cents, hitting like supposedly it does something. I don't know if it does something after the fact or during the live stream, but if you enjoy the video, please do give it a like, because YouTube tells me it makes a difference. I don't honestly know if it does or it does not. Frank, good morning. I hope you are getting ready for a fun Christmas. A lot of my office has been taken out with various illnesses, mostly COVID. So I have been COVID testing. I've now done, oh my gosh, I think I've tested 3 times this week, maybe 4 now. I did this morning as well. So because that will determine whether or not I will go and visit my parents on Monday. So anyway, so far so good though. Good morning, Kevin. Hope things are going well for you in Florida. Good morning, Tuna. Merry Christmas, or Merry almost Christmas. Not quite there yet, but we are very, very close. But what isn't close are those new sales of Apple Watches. You like my subtle as a chainsaw transition? I sure like it, and that's why I said it. So here we go. A link to this article in Fortune is in the video description if you want to go and read this. It is about Apple smartwatch. Okay, so what's going on? This has been big news if you're into Apple Watches. I am not, but I mean, it's Apple Watches, so it came up like on CNN's main page and stuff. I did not find this searching for watch news. This just showed up because Apple, if you didn't know, and it's possible if you don't really think about it in the context of watches, but Apple is by far, easily the largest manufacturer of watches in the entire world. Their smartwatch has taken the world by storm. And as time has gone by, they have added more and more technology into the watch. The problem, which is explored in this Fortune article, which goes over a situation that has happened in the US, is over a patent dispute. Now, I'm not very familiar with a lot of how Apple operates. I have read, so this is alleged, but I have read allegations that Apple has a fondness for stealing technology from other companies and dropping it into their products, and either relying on people not being able to compete with them legally, relying on people not wanting to fight them legally, or relying on, if it does go the legal route, that they're able to buy their way out of the problem, either paying off the entity. Like, oh, long story short, they find a way. They find a way to make it work. So, did they find a way in this instance? Not currently. However, there is some possibility that something may happen as late as Christmas Day. So, I mean, I don't expect anything can happen this weekend. I did a quick search this morning to see if there was any new news on this, but like in terms of a stay or like presidential intervention, which can happen technically. But what's happened, long story short, is Apple has halted the sale of their smartwatches. Now, this really impacts, well, three watches mainly. It's the Apple Watch Series 9 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2. They also have been selling refurbished Apple Watch Series 8 watches. So those are pulled as well now. Technically, this would impact Apple Watches, I believe, all the way back to Series 6. So quite a while, but they obviously don't sell that old of a model anymore. The reason that all this has happened is it is the pulse oximeter technology. So the situation is a company that had developed pulse oximeter technology called Masimo Corporation had filed suit or filed complaint. The International Trade Commission looked into this, and they had ruled, and it's not a new ruling, this actually happened in October, but they had ruled, the ITC, that Apple had, in their view, clearly violated Masimo patents, had stolen the technology on being able to read a person's blood oxygen saturation, and then had placed it, obviously quite a while ago, into their smartwatch lineup. Now, I know people who love this technology in the Apple Watch. They love the pulse oximeter. It's a key medical feature for health tracking purposes that people are very fond of with the smartwatches. And unlike some of these other disputes that have happened in the past with Apple and their technology, where they can just push a code update out to take out, their, I'm going to, again, alleged stolen code. In this case, it's the actual hardware. So the order has been, they can't sell them anymore. And so they've been pulled. So the review period, as I noted, is not over yet. That goes through December 25th. So something may happen. Excuse me. Swallowed wrong. Whew, my apologies. So something could technically still happen all the way through Monday. But for the time being, at least, Apple has preemptively, before they were allowed to sell all the way, I believe, through the end of the review period, but they already had pulled back on those sales. And so that is the current situation. So anyway, I don't know if any of you have thoughts on this. I thought there were some pieces in this article. Again, I won't read it to you. Go and read it. It's in the video description, but just some elements that were kind of interesting. I think just to let you get a context of the scale of Apple in the watch space, but it is believed that they make this was as of their fiscal year 2023, they make $17 billion just off the watches. Easily the most profitable watch operation in the entire world is Apple. And so this, even though, I mean, their whole wearable section, so it's not everything Apple sells, but their wearables, their home and accessory stuff, they clump that together for investors. That's a $40 billion section to the company, 17 billion of which is just the watches. So this is huge. This is huge for a variety of reasons. One, it's going to have a big impact on consumers who maybe wanted to buy these watches. Obviously, a lot of people that were doing Christmas shopping probably were able to get them before the pull happened. They're also probably still available on some third-party sites, so that's still maybe an option for some folks. But that's going to dry up, obviously, as Apple is ostensibly not going to be building any more of these unless and until this either gets resolved or they pull the pulse ox tech out of the watch and make a new version. And I don't know. I'm sure they don't want to do that. But otherwise, a review has to go in their favor. Or option 3, of course, is they strike a deal with a patent holder, which, if we want to pull from pinball, this happened back in pinball used to have this a lot. So and since I know pinball better than watches, let me weave you a tale about how this happened with a company doesn't exist anymore called Stern Electronics. Now, there's a company called Stern Pinball today. It is not the same as Stern Electronics. It is not technically a continuation of Stern Electronics. Stern Electronics went away as a company. And then the people behind that got involved with a company called Data East. Data East sold their pinball division to Sega, very famous video game manufacturer. And then Sega sold the company to Gary Stern, and it got renamed Stern Pinball. That's the chain of Stern Pinball. Stern Electronics, Gary Stern worked for, helped found, but it went away. I'm rambling. Why is it relevant to the Apple Watch story? Well, when solid state technology came out, Stern Electronics stole Bally's board tech. They reverse engineered it. They hired the same firm that developed it, and they got it reverse engineered, and they started making solid state circuit boards for their pinball machines. Bally went into litigation about this infringement, and ultimately what ended up happening is that entire first gen of Stern Electronics boards, they had to pay for every pinball machine they sold a share to Bally for using their tech. That could happen here with Apple. They could go and strike a deal with Massimo Corporation and pay them. Probably, if I were Massimo, I'd be saying, you'll pay us per watch you sold, and you will continue to pay us per watch you sold for using our every watch that has Pulse Ox tech, we get money for. They could possibly strike an arrangement like that at some stage. But when will it happen? Probably not by Monday. Otherwise, I would have thought they would have tried to make this happen before they had to pull the stock. But it is what it is. It's what happened at this point. The rest of this article kind of dives into something which I thought was pretty interesting about just sort of the potential impact this would have on their actual share price. So again, here's a notation about the Biden administration is having their U.S. trade representative review this and consider all factors in the dispute. And so the deadline for the review is Monday, is Christmas Day, because it's all based off of when the ruling happened. So with all of that, Apple's claim is that the ITC was wrong. So Apple is still not claiming they took anything, but obviously the current ruling is that they did. So anyway, the thought is that this could impact Apple. Apple has not been making money recently, and the thought was they were going to finally turn profitable again. But with this loss of these sales, maybe they don't. And share prices had dropped by about 2% back when the announcement came out. So anyway, that's kind of that piece of information. So what are your guys' thoughts on any of that? I don't know. Some of you probably do have Apple Watches. I know a lot of watch collectors do actually have a smartwatch. And if you have a smartwatch, it almost assuredly is an Apple because it's the most popular brand, though I know Garmin plays very strongly in that space as well. But the numbers do not lie, as they say. So let me go ahead and catch up on chat. We've got Tuna saying, I just can't do smartwatches, too old and too cynical. As I've said repeatedly, I don't own and have not had an interest in a smartwatch. And that's mostly because I feel like I read my phone enough as it is. I don't need my watch to become my phone as well. I look at my phone too much already. So that's why I kind of refuse to do it. Plus, while I can respect a lot of the stuff like pulse oximeter technology on your wrist, I like for tracking walking and steps and stuff. A lot of times you can just use the phone for that now because it's in your pocket. So that's like the one health thing I possibly do with my phone is I'll use it to log steps. But honestly, once I do like a route, like I walk to and from work usually I try and do it 2 days a week. I already know the distance. I did it like I know walking to work is about 150 calories of effort. So I don't need to log it I think a lot of people think that they get all this because it's all these analytics and then they don't actually ever use the data for anything. Most people are not very data oriented, in my opinion, and they just don't actually use what they have all this stuff and they're like, oh, look, I could chart my exercise. I could track my stuff. And I was like, well, what do you do? Like if you need a little alert to tell you you've done 10,000 steps, have your phone do it. Is it less accurate? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how they do it. Is it GPS at this point? I would assume so. It sounds like it's going to be the same thing the phone did or the watch did. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's whatever suits you, but there's nothing there that really appeals to me. And if there was, I'd probably lean towards something more bracelet-esque like a Fitbit and then just have the traditional watch. But that's just how it is. Jeffrey, hello. Merry Christmas. I don't normally go by Din Din. One of my co-hosts has decided that is my nickname, even though I never had that nickname growing up. But Anyway, it now lives on apparently, and others parrot it. Jeff is in the wireless space, or Jeffrey. I don't know if you like being called Jeff. Too much inventory out there for them to hold off long. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to try. I'm sure there will be a desire for a settlement. I'm sure Massimo once, that they got a ruling in their favor is great for them. It gives them a great deal of leverage, assuming it holds under the U.S. review from the trade representative. But it gives them a position. And I cannot imagine Apple giving up the pulse oximeter technology and developing a new, lesser version and calling it the Series 10. I don't know what they're going to do. Here's the Series 10. It's in titanium. I'm still amused by the whole campaign for the Apple phone this year seems to be that the edge is in titanium. And I just, again, those of us in watches, if you want a solid titanium watch, Citizen has tons of them for you that are highly affordable. This decision by Apple to act like titanium is some special metal that's like super prestigious or something is fascinating to me. It would be like going around and advertising your new phone trimmed in iron. I just don't understand why you would think it's a selling point, but apparently they think it is. Frank says, there's a lot to like about smartwatches, but I'm not interested. Perhaps if I had health problems, it might be more attractive. Frank never looked too well. That's so mean. So mean, Tuna, but he approves. And Ken says, shouldn't put a dent in AAPL. Which I guess I could have just said Apple. A dent, Apple's like an empire, right? It's a huge empire. And if we're running with like Galactic Empire as our analogy, which is probably absolutely terrible to do, but let's go ahead and keep with it since I already mentioned it. Losing the Apple Watch is it's not losing a Death Star, but it's more than losing a Star Destroyer, right? It $17 billion just out of the watches. Their accessories line, their home wearables and accessory line is a $40 billion a year business. And this is almost half of that business. So I do think it's more significant than I might initially say. Now, it wouldn't be so significant that I think you would see a lot of investment advisors saying, sell off your Apple stock. It's no longer a good long-term hold or something like. I don't think that's the case. And as noted, we only saw the stock fall by under 2% when the news dropped earlier this week about this decision on having to pull the old Apple Watches out of the stores. Well, not the old one, all of them. Pull all the ones they were selling proper. But it's the issue is long term. If they don't get it settled, that might end up having a lot more of an impact. And I was trying to see what happened. So this is I'll jump back to the article here. Here's the portion that I was trying to remember. Apple previously said its first quarter revenue would be in line with the year earlier period. That suggests that the Apple Watch disruption could be the difference between revenue growing for the first time in a year or declining again. Already, the company's sales have dropped for 4 straight quarters, the longest such streak in 2 decades. So Apple isn't doing great. I'm not saying Apple's doing bad, but Apple isn't doing what Apple had always been doing. Apple is in a slump, and this could exacerbate that and actually make it so that they have another decline. And they've been on a bit of a bear run right already. So that's the part that maybe investors won't. Again, I don't see people like mixing up their indexes or anything. And, it's not going to move out of its top positioning, but it's a huge chunk of its business. And it's enough that it could actually impact their profitability because they're on the line already with being able to show an increase. So those sort of things, I think, are more of the issue. So dent, I don't know, because that kind of implies maybe a long-term change. I don't know. It's they really like people aren't buying their laptops. People buy their watches, their phones and their watches. And so going in and taking all of the watches out is a bit of an issue, especially if there are any competitors that might swoop in that do have either licensed, patented pulse ox technology, or they develop their own, like they use something outside of Massimo. I'm skeptical that they're really going to eclipse Apple at this point, but no, never say never. There was a time Blackberries were all the rage. Tuna says true. The Apple Watch is just so much of some people's lives. Then again, many folks just use their phone, like me. But I use an Android device, so what do I know about any of that? Okay, let's move to the next topic, the far more interesting one for watch people, Rolex, right? This is why everyone clicked on this and why I put it in the, even though I put it first in the title, I put it second in the list to drag it out. I got to get them 9 viewers to stick around. That's the strategy. So this one, this has been covered in a lot of places. I have a link in the video description to Time and Tide, which is the one I'm showing on the screen. So if you want to read that one, you may, but there are plenty of other outlets that I've covered this news. I saw at least one YouTube, surely there's more than one. I saw at least one YouTube video already on the topic a few days ago, in fact. But anyway, so this is not the United States like the Apple situation. This is France. And in France, they fined Rolex $100 million. And the reason for it is what's so interesting. It's because Rolex has banned their authorized dealers from selling new Rolex watches online. That's what the fine is for. So it's an antitrust decision. And as the article will explain, what happened is Rolex's defense to why they don't allow the watches to be sold online is that it's sort of a twofold thing. It's to stop what they called parallel trade, which I assume is flipping. So people going to Rolex, buying a watch, and then selling it to a gray market dealer who sells the unworn watch at a significant uptick. And Rolex doesn't like that process happening. And so they argue that that would be a lot worse if people were able to buy the watches new online from them. So instead, they say you need to go and do it in person, and that helps control that. And then their other argument was it helps combat counterfeiting. So you can always know if you go to a dealer who's licensed to sell Rolex and they're selling you a new watch, that watch is going to be authentic. You can't be fooled. If you're going and someone's telling you they're selling you a new Rolex online, it could be fake. There's no guarantee, but going to the store is the guarantee that it's real. So the autorité or whatever it's, sorry, I don't speak French. The antitrust agency for France did not buy either of those arguments. My understanding is the main reasoning is, this makes sense on the surface of it, is other watch manufacturers, Rolex may be the biggest. Well, Rolex is the biggest in terms of market share of the Swiss market specifically on profitability, but other very large brands like Cartier, Omega, you can buy those new online. So why is it not okay for Rolex? Why does Rolex have this big problem with counterfeits, but Cartier and Omega don't? Right? I mean, or at least they somehow are able to sell online even with all those fears. And we've seen, I mean, I've seen on YouTube super clones of Omega watches specifically. So it's definitely, at least that first part is still definitely a problem. The parallel trade thing might be more specific to Rolex, but but that's just because of multiple watches. Omega Snoopy's had the parallel trade issue, the Speedmaster one with the Snoopy on the rocket on the back. I mean, that has been, that's borderline unobtainium to get new retail, or at least it was in the pandemic. Cartier might have a few models like that. I don't know if they do though, but Omega does. So anyway, it's a bunch of crap. That's what the French, they said it nicer than that, but they was like, it's a bunch of crap. This excuse doesn't work. That's not, other companies are doing just fine. So they get fined though, because then you end up with all of this stuff. And we already know what a lot of this article goes into, which is about the games, the authorized dealer games, where you have to go and buy a bunch of lady date justs and Oyster Perpetuals you didn't want, so that you can go and get your Titanium Yachtmaster or your Bubble OP, all that sort of stuff that people don't like having to do to jump around with. Another thing that I heard another YouTuber had explored was this aspect about Rolex also shot themselves in the foot on their arguments to the antitrust authority in France because of the certified pre-owned program. So certified pre-owned program watches are signed off by Rolex as being certified, genuine, real pre-owned Rolex watches. Those are allowed to be sold online. So You still got parallel trade concerns, possibly. You still have counterfeit concerns, definitely. Yet somehow, with it certified pre-owned, it's okay to sell online. If it's brand new, it's not okay to sell. It's not consistent. It's hypocritical. And I think the French antitrust authority wisely pointed out that this does not make sense. And so Rolex going ahead and saying, we want to get a share of this pre-owned market has actually undermined them when it came to the antitrust examination in France, at the very least. So long-term impact fallout discussions. A lot of times when we see something change somewhere, even if it's just one place, it has a trickle effect. In the United States, I think the most famous example of this is why car manufacturers get so bent out of shape when California passes a new environmental regulation, because California is such a huge car market that if you're going to comply with California law, you end up just having to do it for the whole nation, because why would you make two different versions of the vehicle? So California often steers the direction of environmental control when it comes to automotive purchases, because they're just a big market share. France is in the EU. France's decision is you have to allow online sales, and those online sales are easily taken advantage of by others in the European Union. Does that mean Rolex just has to throw up their hands and say, okay, we're going to have to allow online sales in all of the EU? And if that's the case, do you not just go ahead and say, fine, the US and the UK, we're going to do it there too? You go, all right, we're going to do it everywhere. You see what I mean? That's the question, that sort of pile-on effect. Even though this is just one country, is it a big enough one? And especially maybe not so much the size, but just that it's in the EU. Does this end up driving a lot of this sort of thing? And there's a lot of discussion that I've seen about authorized dealers that tried to sell online and claims that Rolex pulled their distributorships because of those desires and things like that. There's a lot that you could, if you want to go into the nuance of it, that you can go and explore. But that's the what if. So let us catch up on the chat regarding what you guys think about the whole Rolex thing. Matt, welcome to live stream, Matt. And what about distributors selling at the back door? Yeah, well, that's kind of where we know with the parallel trade. Clearly, Matt, you're aware that that's been happening whether it's online or not. So again, part of the reason why I suspect that the French antitrust authority didn't really buy Rolex's argument is it's happening already, even if the distributor doesn't sell it out the back door. And we've seen claims that they have before. I think Rolex has enforced that on one or two US distributors that were found to be selling basically directly to the gray market. That said, the consumers are doing it anyway, whether they have to go. There's so many Rolex ADs all over the place. It's like, again, I live in the Kansas City area. I cannot go and visit an authorized dealer for Vacheron. There's no Vacheron dealer in the Kansas City area remotely. The closest VC dealer, I think, is 8 hours away by car. And the same is true for Zenith. I believe the same is true for Audemars Piguet. Actually, I think Audemars Piguet and Moser are even further out for me to get to. Longa is even further out. My point is, Rolex is everywhere because Rolex makes 1.2 million watches a year. Let us not forget, as popular as they are, this is not a very special brand in the sense that they make a great watch, but they make a lot of them. That this is such a desirable good at over 1 million units a year, honestly, from an economic standpoint, remains flabbergasting to me. But it is what it is. So let's just bear in mind that Rolex is really easy to get to locally. There are not a lot of people that live too far away from a Rolex AD because Rolex ADs are like, they're everywhere. They're probably the easiest to find luxury watch dealer, maybe aside from Tag Heuer, which is like at every mall near you. But other than that, it's very easy to get to them in person. So does the online thing really control it? I'm skeptical. Ken says France should look at their own first and make Hermes sell better bags online. Well, it's maybe they are looking at, or who has anyone made a claim against them? This is an antitrust claim. So what issue going into that, or if there's just certain things that are, again, we've seen lots of instances, including in watches, where companies have like, this is a Bucherer only sort of watch. Bucherer is a great example now that Rolex owns them. A Bucherer only watch. Tudor has things like that with them. So again, this is more about just saying we are using a third-party network, and now we're dictating. I think this is what the French antitrust authority has said. If you are using a third-party network and you are dictating this level of control, you are dictating too much. They already get to dictate. I mean, this didn't go into everything. Like the rule, like if Rolex is saying, you can't sell more than MSRP, like that's a rule to be a dealer. Like they didn't say you couldn't do that. Though apparently, the ability to sell under that is allowable. I've always assumed that was the case with Rolex. They haven't needed to do that recently. But so yeah, I assume, I may be wrong, but I assume like if Rolex wants to say Bucherer can't sell online, French antitrust authority doesn't have a concern with that because they own Bucherer. It's their distributorship. They get to control what they want. But if you're using Tivel, which is an authorized dealer here in Kansas City, to sell your watches, if Tivel likes to sell stuff online, and spoiler, they do, then it's a step too far to say we just don't allow our watches to be sold online. They're not that precious, quite frankly. So it's extra absurd given the volume that they make, in my opinion. But Tuna says the Rolex attitude must put many people off. It's a mix. It's more the AD games, I think, than Rolex in and of itself that most people I know of that are, especially if they're fans of the brand or want to be fans of the brand, it's usually the authorized dealers that piss people off. And that actually is the part that gets explored a little bit in the Time and Tide article, which is this little section here talking about, so consumers around the world have been left to navigate the so-called AD games, the perceived best paths of success in scoring an allocation from a Rolex authorized dealer. Because Rolex doesn't care in the sense like it's not Rolex makes money every time they sell the watches to the distributors, to the dealers. So Rolex doesn't have a rule saying, yeah, you're going to buy 3 Lady Datejusts and then we'll let you buy an Explorer and then we'll let you be on the list for a Daytona. Rolex doesn't care if you get a Daytona as your first watch or your fifth. They don't care. But the ADs do, or they play games with it to move the inventory that moves slower, or move inventory that's not even Rolex. Because again, a lot of these authorized dealers, like my Tivel example, they sell far more. They sell jewelry, and then they sell a lot of other watches. Like the Tivel dealer in Kansas City is also the official dealer for Tag Heuer. They're the official dealer for Patek Philippe. Not that they need to use Rolexes to help move Pateks. They're also the official dealer for Cartier and JLC. So, and obviously, like when we're getting into brands like JLC or some of the Tudors, Tivel may have a harder time moving some of those. So you could see an argument if they wanted to start saying, yeah, well, we'll put you down for that Submariner date. But I really, this Polaris has been sitting here for 6 months. I really need to move it along. That sort of thing. Kin says, or they could just pull out of France. Sure. But I think it's extremely unlikely. I can't imagine that they would. I don't know how much of their total market share is French, but at best that might be kicking the can down the road. Given the French decision and the EU's fondness for conformity on trade issues, it would not surprise me it would end up dominoing anyway, even if Rolex let's just say Rolex didn't pull out and they said, okay, French dealers could sell online, or they pulled out. But then Germany says, you know what, this is a rule for us too. I mean, they're not really going to write off all of Europe, right? China isn't going to make up for that market share, not in this economy. So I think it's super unlikely. Rolex's arrogance might be such that their leadership might have initially gut instinct reaction would have been like as a knee-jerk thing, let's just pull out of France. I don't know. To pull another hobby or industry, I should say, example, video games. This came up when Microsoft was in the process of acquiring Activision, and all these trade authorities, some of them were reluctant, but they were all signing off except the UK. And there was a big discussion. I even discussed it on one of my podcasts that I do on gaming, that maybe Microsoft should just pull out of the UK, and because Activision's worth that much. But most serious analysts didn't think it was honestly a legitimate strategy. Part of it is the commingling. What does it mean for their AD relationships? Are there provisions? Is Rolex allowed to just break the relationship anytime they want? Maybe. A lot of potential fallout though with that. So I don't know. But I don't deem it as a legitimate action that they would honestly do. Tuna apparently agrees. That just doesn't seem likely. Ken says, can't allow online sales, protect crown first and foremost. Except, again, can't allow online sales is kind of dumb. Like, why can everyone else in the entire world allow online sales, and Rolex is so weak that they can't figure out how to protect the crown without banning the practice? Like, I think I can go online and buy a Patek online. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And that's where I think the French antitrust authority was at. It's like, who's the second biggest in terms of dollar amounts, money generated in Swiss watch, luxury watch sales? It's Cartier. Cartier sells online on their own website. Why are you so special that you can't figure it out? Not that they're, and who would care if the antitrust authority would say it. Let's put an even nastier spin on it. Why is Rolex so incompetent that they're the only ones that can't figure out how to do it? Are they just stupid? Like, online isn't new. This is old tech at this point. Everyone else is figuring it out. Do they just not want to figure it out? Or is it just some sort of, we're number one, so we're just that arrogant that we won't allow online sales? The watches are sold online regularly. But regardless of any of that, I think they totally shot themselves in the foot with the CPO program, because they allow those to be sold online. And it just undermines every argument they had. Nope, somehow new ones can't be sold online. But if we officially sign off and certify a used one, I don't see how the counterfeit stuff and the parallel trade stuff is different with it. It doesn't make any sense. So it was a bad argument because their reasoning is bad. They just don't want them online because I think they think it allow it. Here's my theory. I think Rolex thinks not allowing their watches to be sold online puts them up on a pedestal, an artificial pedestal of prestige, as like an implication. Just like, this is too good to be sold online. It's not. That's not the world anymore. It's just not. So I don't feel real strong, again, because Rolex dealers are everywhere. I never felt strongly about Rolex not selling new because it's so easy to find them. But again, I like these arguments, the arguments they ran with, they sound really kind of stupid, because it would only have made sense if a bunch of other watch manufacturers were in the same boat with them. And you can argue fairly that Rolex has another issue, like different than other manufacturers, on parallel trade. But then it's a debate whether or not that's honestly a problem. So the counterfeiting, I think, is a stronger argument, except lots of watches are counterfeit, not just Rolex. Cartier gets counterfeit watches. Omega gets counterfeit. I even saw, it was terrible because no one wants to do the hand finishing for obvious reasons, but I even seen counterfeit Longa ones. I mean, they're awful, but they're there. So it's just, they're just not that special. Their arguments, maybe they've huffed enough of their own special sauce to think that they stand alone in some regard. They stand at the top of the heap, absolutely. But just like on our prior article we talked about, Apple sits at the top of the heap. That doesn't mean that they can push around a little company like Massimo and get away with it and break the law and get away with it. And so it's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And in fact, let's point out, so Rolex did actually have a comment, not related to the ruling, but they had made a comment about the whole supply and demand thing, saying scarcity of our products is not a strategy. So they're claiming their goal isn't to throttle the ability for people who want their watches to get them. But that would be the most logical reason to keep them offline, in my opinion. But I don't sell watches. It's not my space. I'm not a professional. So Matt says, I am on a so-called waiting list for a Datejust 36 millimeter for almost 5 years. I would probably follow up and see if they still have your name on the list. But I mean, I've heard of long ones. Historically, the only list I ever heard that went as far out as 5 years with Rolex was Daytona's. But things did get a little weird in the pandemic era. Ken says they care about who has their stock. Having online sales just hands it over to some of the worst players possible. Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe are the same. Well, now AP, you see, now AP, though, they control their supply in a more legitimate way because they deal almost everything with AP at this point is through their own boutiques. Again, my understanding of and I have not read the ruling because the ruling is in French and I do not know French, but my understanding of the ruling here is like if Rolex, if they don't want to sell online as Rolex, that's fine. It's dictating terms to third-party distributors that they are choosing to use as a venue for their watches to be sold. And so they're taking too much control away from the venue. Rolex does not own Tyrrell. It's arrogant of them to act like that they do in this decision, is what the French would be saying if Tyrrell was a French company. AP, I believe they maybe still have a few third-party dealers, but by and large, AP directly sells their watches. If Rolex wants to directly sell their watches and Booker style buy up all their distributors and not sell online, my understanding is that would have been seen as legal and okay and not antitrust at all. But Rolex wants it both ways. They want to use a network of companies that they don't own to force them to buy their watches, which is how Rolex makes all their money. Rolex does not make money when I buy a Rolex. Rolex makes money when Tyrrell buys the Rolex. So they want to get all the advantages of cash flow and everything by forcing 80s to buy every little surprise box of watches that they ship off to them, but then dictate everything regarding how that watch is going to be sold. And the online aspect was a step too far for the French. I think it's a smart decision because I think that's asking for too much authority. I'll pull another pinball example. We have a problem, in my view, a problem in the pinball industry where in the contracts, these manufacturers dictate floors. So with Rolex, again, they're saying if you want to be a dealer, you can't sell this over MSRP. That's very pro-consumer, and I think it makes sense. In pinball, they'll come in with like an MSRP, but sometimes the MSRP is also the minimum advertised price and the minimum sale price. And those terms and those contracts are perpetual. A pinball machine could be 8 years old. A dealer could be sitting on it in stock for 8 years. And their contracts with many of these manufacturers say they can never discount it. Well, how are they supposed to get rid of it? If you can't ever fire sale it without risking your contract, how and what we've seen this year, one of the distributors on one of those companies just started fire sailing. The distributor did not cancel their contract. They just broke it. They broke the contract and they basically dared the company to punish them. And when the company didn't say anything about it, other distributors started fire sailing it. But that's one of the smaller manufacturers. If something like Stern Pinball, which is like 80% of the market, and they have the same terms, they could enforce it and cost people their livelihood because it's not like a jewelry company could lose Rolex and ostensibly still survive. It's not the same in pinball. But we've now started to see some companies like Stern allowing them to fire sale certain things because you raise a lot of these questions. No distributor is bothered to bring an antitrust claim. They might have a case that those terms are too draconian on a third party that you make buy your stuff, and then you're making rules for them on what they get to do with it after they bought the inventory. And that's what Rolex is doing here. How far is too far is going to vary by each country's anti-trade rules. But as a consumer, I don't see how any of this helps me. Online sales help me. Non-online sales don't help me. Now, for like me personally, I don't really care one way or the other. But conceptually, more choice is better for a consumer. Rolex doesn't seem to have a legitimate, honest reason why this is going to protect the consumer. I see all sorts of reasons why it protects the crown, but what does a French antitrust authority care about a Swiss company's market brand status? They don't. Switzerland would probably be the only one that maybe would. But it's tough to say. Tuna says, fake Casio and Seiko 5s. I can't. Wow, who would fake a Casio? Most of them are so approachable. I don't understand it. Ken says, but the 80s, like Tivel, also want to use Rolexes to move inventory. Why would they want to sell Rolexes online? Well, it depends on the brand. So in the case of Tivel, at least per them, they don't use Rolexes. Rolexes might get you to come into the store, but if they want you to come to the website looking at a Rolex, and they have little pop-ups that show up to get you to buy a necklace for your wife or something. There's an angle. Here's the thing with Tivel, because I'm on a wait list at Tivel. When I went into Tivel and I said I wanted to be on a wait list for, I wanted a watch, I wanted a Rolex watch, they did not ask me to buy any other inventory. They did not try and get me to buy any other inventory. Unless I had expressed interest in another model, they didn't try and show it to me or anything. And when I asked them about, would that help? They said, no, we just take a list. And our main thing is we try and sell to people in the Kansas City area. That's the main focus. It's like a sales domain. Tivel is the Kansas City area. They try and get it to Kansas City residents. That's the approach. Now, I know not all the authorized dealers do that, but in their case, selling online could be a convenience factor, especially for the Rolex watches that don't move very well. And people just want to go online and maybe schedule an in-store pickup or something like that. There are opportunities there. Again, if an AD, though, let's say Tivel wanted to use the Rolex to move more inventory, they have the right to just choose not to sell them online. And where does it make sense to say for that? Let's say Tivel didn't want to sell online, and then they got mad because Watches of Switzerland was. Well, welcome to competition. Welcome to the market. Especially in America, where in America would we allow one third-party distributor to dictate how another could do business? Absolutely outrageous. Not acceptable. Not free market. So that is not, if they want to still not sell online, that's their right. Welcome to the economy and welcome to real competition. And it does not behoove consumers for there to be anti-competitive strings applied to artificially prop up the price or the status of the crown or whatever. Bear in mind, I don't own stock in Rolex. It is not to my advantage to see them have artificial protections. So conceptually, this is a great move for everyone, in my view, other than people who own shares of Rolex or whoever, Hans Willdorf Foundation, basically. So since a nonprofit owns them. Will it possibly impact the value of people's watches? I don't think so, because there's still the same supply and demand, right? So they make their 1.2 million watches a year. We already know that people get rid of their watches when they're done with them, or they do the whole gray market thing and flip them. And so if you're able to go online and find certain ones, would that maybe undermine some of the gray pricing? Maybe, but most of the popular watches are still going to be popular and just as hard to get. It's just some more people might be buying them online from Watches of Switzerland instead of showing up at their door and buying them. I don't see a big change in this same end game. In fact, maybe more end up kind of getting back to what Matt had talked about on the ADs flipping them out the back door. Maybe they just start basically getting flipped out the front because gray market's going in and buying them. I'm not aware of this I didn't see anything about this antitrust decision that indicated Rolex couldn't try and crack down on people scooping them up. So they might still be able to have stipulations and contracts on ADs to try and make sure that a bunch of grays aren't going in and scooping up all of the inventory. And if that's the case, that might indirectly pressure dealers to do what they've been doing and not sell online because they become afraid of running afoul of Rolex's other rules. Now, whether that's true and that's going to hold out or not, I have no idea. It would be interesting if basically Rolex was able to enforce no online sales through a separate provision and basically loophole their way around what the French said. And maybe they'll try that. I could see them trying that and being like, you know what? Fine. You're allowed to sell online, but all dealers have an expectation. Like, we're going to do serial number checks, and just know we'll pull your contract if we see these things hit gray in 2 years. And we'll just start logging every serial number we send you. And that ends up on Watchbox or Watch. Well, those are secondhand dealers. So those end up at TPG when he gets out of jail and he's trying to flip them gray. And we see that serial number is our serial number. Boom, your contract's pulled. And that scares everyone into keeping offline. I could see that. Maybe they do that because they still have a lot of control over choosing who is and is not a dealer. But anyway, those are the 2 articles I had. A quieter day. That's a holiday weekend. How could I not? He says, but they do actually fake Casio, crazy as it seems. Well, I will believe you because you've said it twice, but it seems very outlandish. Maybe if I could see people wanting to fake that all gold one. How would they do that though? I mean, it's a simple G-Shock to clone. I wonder if they do lead and then they paint it PVD it gold. That's all we need is more lead in our stuff. Kind of like those cinnamon pouches. If you've been hearing about the cinnamon pouches, like the applesauce pouches with cinnamon, and they have all these really high lead levels. And I was like, is there like lead in the soil? I mean, lead is in the soil. I thought, why is it so high? And I finally read an article on it. Totally separate from watches, other than my weird fake gold analogy, because lead is heavy like gold. It's because spices are sold by weight. And so in some places they grind up lead and throw it in the spice so they get more money, and then poisoned a whole bunch of kids. But anyway, this is not the Public Health with Dennis podcast. This is Watches with Dennis. So let's see. Matt says a real Casio already looks fake. That's I should have worn. Oh, I didn't say I'm wearing my Mr. Jones watches Ricochet today. Don't usually wear my novelty watches, so I got it out yesterday. But I almost wore my G-Shock because it might be one of my top 5 watches. It might be, or it is. Spoiler, it will be in the video. Tuna says, laughing out loud to me, in China, they fake everything. Well, I mean, I guess, except those seagull movements. I mean, they really did buy the rights to those, so they get to do them. And Ken says they could do many things to limit online sales, even if a regulatory body is against them. Yeah, and that's what I think they'll do. I don't think they're going to pull out of France. I don't know about them. I don't know if they have the opportunity to fight the $100 million fine. And if there is an opportunity, I'm sure they'll try and fight that. But yeah, I think they'll just try and work a different term. Not expressly prohibit online sales, but make it clear, like certain things that they expect to happen with their watch. Again, if the goal is truly what they claimed to the antitrust authority, which is about combating counterfeiting, parallel trade, my understanding is they weren't told they can't try and do all of that stuff. Likewise, though, they weren't told that the CPO program was the only reason why this didn't make any sense. Because on paper, maybe they should have initially. I don't think it would have I don't think it would have gotten them to survive this personally, but it didn't do them any favors for them to tell their distributors they were allowed to sell certified pre-owned online. And I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle on that. So anyway, yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. But I'm going to go ahead and call it today. So this will be the end of this live stream. Will I be back next Saturday? Probably. I do see a question from Pixel, and I do have some time, so I guess we could talk about this. Any predictions for the watch world or specific brands next year? Oh, Pixel. I usually, before Watches and Wonders start doing a prediction thing, I don't know if I normally do a prediction episode. I just normally like mentally start trying to predict. So I'll be curious to see if anyone in the live stream chat, if you have thoughts on what you expect to see. I thought we were going to see a new Submariner this year because it was an anniversary, and we did not. The GMT Master 2, we're talking Rolex because we were just on the subject of Rolex. I believe it is a big anniversary year for them in 2024. I do expect us to see a new colorway. I'm not going to go and say they're going to retire the Pepsi bezel. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't think they retire the Pepsi bezel. I think it's too good of a seller for them to want to retire it. But I do think it would be nice for them to bring back the Coke bezel, at least for 1 year. Maybe that has a special dial celebrating the anniversary. maybe that one is only in white gold or something as another thing. Obviously it'll do better if it's in steel, but the Rolex sometimes for their special models will do a precious metal as a celebratory thing. So I do think we'll see that. So I do think we'll see some new celebratory GMT Master 2. I think it's too big to miss that one. I still am shocked that we didn't see a sub this year that did something. You could argue maybe it wasn't necessarily a big, it wasn't like the 50th anniversary. So maybe it wasn't big enough, but I don't know. It's weird with Rolex. Like they didn't do anything proper with the Explorer 2. I still think that was a joke of a year. Shockingly similar to the prior model, but the Explorer 2 also historically hasn't been a very popular watch. So the GMT Master 2 is like right behind the Daytona in terms of desirability. So I think we'll see that. I'm a little surprised. I wouldn't have said this, but we talked about this last week, but Breitling has acquired Universal Genève. I think they may have already been doing development stuff. We might actually see some UG watches next year. So I'm going to put that out. I don't know by Watches and Wonders. It still seems awfully aggressive of a development cycle, but if they've been working on this behind the scenes for a while in terms of what they wanted to do with the brand, I think we might see some UG. But temper your expectations. I did listen to the podcast, the Blog to Watch podcast for this week or last week. And that group, Breitling is going to be the cheaper watches. They're going to be on the lower end of the scale. UG is going to be priced higher than Breitling. So just be prepared for like 5-figure watches with Universal Genève. It's not going to be affordable stuff. So just be aware of it. I think that I'm trying to think any other things. Maybe, I don't know if I want to call it a prediction. Well, I'll predict it. I think JLC might finally upgrade the tech in the Polaris. They did have a couple of new dial iterations, which I thought were very attractive this year, but it's still just, it's long in the tooth in terms of the movement and such. So I do think we'll finally see them move forward with doing that, not just dropping a bunch of reversos like they did this year, which all looked great, but given they've been driving the pricing up so much, Richemont owns JLC. I think they'll finally update the sports line because in theory they should be doing better in sports watches than they do. So I think we'll see that. And gosh, I want to give you guys a last one. I'm trying to think of a brand that pops into my head. Nothing's really clicking with me right now that I feel really strongly on. So I guess I won't. Matthew, welcome to Livestream, and thank you for being an 99% Club member. Thoughts on the current Air King? Slightly improved aesthetically versus the old Air King, but I still think it's ugly. Some people really like it. It's very unique. It's for me, the ugliness actually is just the combination of its look. It has all the pieces to it I like. I just don't like how they glued it together. So it's just not for me. But because the dial reminds me of a Type B Flieger, but then they've got like the Explorer, like 369. So I just don't like the mesh of it. I would rather than I would really like it, but I mean, I already own a Type B Flieger from Stova, so I'm not in the market for another, but I would really like it if the Air King actually just went all in on the Type B aesthetic and didn't have it look like a Type A combined with a Type B or something, or an Explorer 1 combined with a Type B. And just go all in on Type B and do hours towards the inner portion of the dial, and then towards the chapter ring, you've got the minute markers. I think that would be a really unique look. Make it very distinct as a pilot watch that is in no way playing in the space of the GMT Master 2. Not that it's playing in the GMT Master 2 space because it's not a GMT watch, but it's just like a weird dialed Explorer to me, and I don't like it. I would not be surprised if Rolex just pulled it. Quite frankly, I mean, they pulled the Milgauss, so why not pull that thing? But anyway, that is what it is. Ken says another Rolex price increase rumor in January. I mean, for most brands, I would say it would be very stupid, given the state of the cooled off watch market. Rolex could probably get away with a modest one because it's Rolex, and I wouldn't be surprised. They do try and do one increase a year if they're going to increase, and they try and do it in January. So I expect it as well, Ken. I hadn't been hearing rumors, but I would have expected it given it's Rolex. But I think don't expect to see I think it's under 5%, whatever. Normally it varies by model. So I'll say the average will be under 5%, at least for the steel watches. I don't think the gold ones are going to go up much more, though. Maybe less, actually, as a percentage. But yeah, they'll probably spike or increase pricing. I think Richemont might finally hold off on JLC. I think they're pricing themselves out of their own market. And it's just, even though the economy has done very well, like unemployment's really low, stocks are doing fine, interest rates are high, and people are still very skittish. And watch sales, quite frankly, are not doing well. Not doing well at all. You're seeing some pretty significant secondhand discounting at the big secondhand dealers on stuff that's been sitting. Like there's a watch I've been monitoring. I went back to look to see when they had listed it. It's been for sale now, I think 5 months. It's just been sitting. So I might pull the trigger here in a week or so. Tell myself no new dress watches until the new year. So just before the new year, I can make the purchase and then arrange for it to arrive after the new year, and it will count. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. But I won't say what that is yet. But there are a few that I'm watching, and a number of them have been sitting a long time. So anyway, that'll be it for the live stream. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, and I will plan to be back next weekend. But until then, Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you hopefully before the new year. Take care.